Thank you for joining us. Have you got your seatbelt buckled? You certainly need it if you're trying to follow your investments or your pension fund or whatever you might have tied up in the market, as 60% of Americans do. Well, in this segment, we're going to hopefully give you some useful information about what's happening with your money. Our guest is Peter Cohan, Associate Professor of Management Practice at Babson College and an expert market analyst who joins us for some perspective on what's happening with your money and the local economy. Peter, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Always great to have you back here. So, our viewers are wondering, I'm sure, what's going on with these Trump trade wars? What can I do to protect myself and my family while it's going on? And is there an end game in sight that avoids recession and disaster?
Well, it's extremely uncertain, but my best guess is that there is no clear endpoint. I think we are heading towards what's called stagflation, which is a situation where prices are going up because of tariffs, and the economy is going down because people can't afford to pay the higher prices. And something like 66% of economic growth in this country comes from consumer spending. So consumers will be spending less. They'll be spending more on sort of the essentials and not spending on a lot of things that are not essential. So that will bring down the economy, which will cause companies to lay off workers who are not needed because they're not growing enough. And that will kind of create this sort of doom loop of people not having their jobs, not having enough money to spend, and companies continuing to lay off. At the same time, prices are going to go up. So the Federal Reserve is going to have to decide, well, should I raise the interest rates to control inflation, or should I keep the rates where they are to keep the unemployment rate from getting worse? And that's stagflation. You've got the combination of economic stagnation and inflation.
For those old enough to remember, this is what we had in the early 70s, correct?
Yes.
When Nixon had wage and price controls to try to get out of it and so forth.
Exactly.
What's the way out? Okay, you're president. What do we do?
Well,
roll all this back?
The way out is just to roll it all back and apologize for making a big, huge mistake.
Okay, well, we know that's not happening.
That is not going to happen, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
So I think if I were to say something that I really don't know the answer to, is what is he thinking the end game is, besides saying it's going to be beautiful, which is always, I think, based on my listening to him over the last couple months, that's the most dangerous word that comes out of his mouth. Whenever he says something is beautiful, that's trouble.
So the White House has clearly identified colleges and universities as politically convenient boogeymen to go after for spending cuts and ideological point scoring. Here in Massachusetts, our economy relies heavily on higher education, its research infrastructure, and the healthcare and medical research establishment that's tied to institutions like Harvard, MIT, UMass Lowell. They call this eds and meds.
Yes.
It's underpinning of our economy.
Yes.
Can eds and meds survive these funding cuts?
Well, it depends on whether some of these academic institutions, which have enormous endowments, can use those endowments to cover some of the funds that used to come from the government that are not coming back. For example, Harvard, supposedly $9 billion coming from the government to Harvard. They have maybe a $50 billion endowment. If that's, roughly correct, that is a lot of money to make up from that. That's not really sustainable, even at a $50 billion endowment. So there are going to be cuts. MIT is saying they've got some kind of hiring freezes on. I think there's going to be cuts, and of course there's the problem of who comes to our school. So on the ed side, and also that's also on the med side, because medical researchers. The great thing about Massachusetts is the brain power. If I were to summarize it very simply, I teach a course on local startup ecosystems. What makes Boston better than Worcester, or all these different locations. So it's the mindset. It's the strength of people's minds. And when we are unilaterally kind of showing up in the middle of the night with an ICE agent, taking people out and throwing them in a prison cell somewhere, will parents from China and India want to send their children here to go to school if that could happen to them?
Wow. All right. We were talking before the break, Peter, about the impact of the brain drain of the immigration crackdown and what that might mean for, colleges like BU, I believe, have, if not a majority, a large plurality of students who are international students. Well, another aspect of this is the people to work in our healthcare industry. My late mom, the nursing home she was in, the majority of the employees were immigrants. What could the crackdown on immigration and the whole roiling sort of anti-immigrant, anti-migrant sentiment do to economic sectors like healthcare or Cape Cod tourism's seasonal sectors that rely on immigrants to power them?
I'm just going to guess that they would have to hire people who live in Massachusetts or live in the United States and pay them a lot more to do the jobs that the people who are the immigrants are doing now. And if they're paying more, that means that the rates at everything, the hotels, the restaurants, and so on, and the rates at the healthcare facilities are going to go up to cover those higher costs. And if they can get people to do those jobs. But if there's a recession, and people are struggling to find jobs in the fields that they were in before, there may be people who say, well, I will take those jobs because at least I'll have some income. So, I mean, in theory, that's what would happen. But it sounds to me like it would mean just more higher costs and higher prices that some people will pay and some people won't pay. So that's a problem.
We're told by the White House that in the end, after whatever posturing goes on, we're the biggest, baddest economic engine on the block, and ultimately China, Canada, you name it, they're going to have to take a knee, or they're going to have to cut a deal with us. So we just got to hang in there and let the art of the deal work its magic. Is there any truth to that?
I sincerely doubt it. One thing that's interesting is that the U.S. has, in the past, had a system where a new president gets elected every 4 years. If you look at a place like China, it seems to me that basically we have the current premier of China is just going to be there for life. So they have a different time frame because they don't have to worry about the political implications of their decisions. But in the U.S., we have these elections, and if the policies that are being promulgated by the Trump administration make some of the senators and Congress people have trouble getting reelected and get voted out of office, then I think that that's going to force a change in this sort of monarchical strategy, which is basically I'm the king and everybody has to bend the knee to me, and that is not what the Constitution set forth. And I think that if we can get some people out there saying this has to change, and that means I'm going to change my senator, I'm going to change my congressman, then maybe that will cause this to change. Otherwise, I do not think that this whole strategy is going to work.
Well, in the meantime, the midterm elections are a year and a half away, more than a year and a half away. We have less than a minute left here. I got to ask you, you watch the news, you follow the financial news.
Yes.
When you see the president, Ludwig, the Commerce Secretary,
yes,
Navarro,
yes.
Peter Navarro, Kevin Hassett,
yes.
Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, do you believe any of these people have the slightest idea what they're doing?
Well, I definitely think that Bessent knows something about finance.
Yeah.
But I also see him kind of basically repeating what he's expected to say. But behind the scenes, I think he played a role in getting Trump to delay the tariffs for 90 days and change the tariff strategy. Because Bessent was getting calls from Bill Ackman and Jamie Dimon and all these leading, highly respected Wall Street investors who were saying, this is economic Armageddon, and you've got to stop doing this. And I think what actually caused him to pull back on this temporarily is the bond market. The 10-year bond rate was going up, which meant that it's a complicated market, but basically people were selling U.S. 10-year treasuries because they wanted to be out of the dollar. the dollar is losing its global preeminence as the reserve currency of the world. And we are rapidly losing our respect as an economy in the world, and that is making us very vulnerable.
Wow. Well, let's hope saner heads prevail.
Indeed.
Peter Cohan, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Check out his new book, Brain Rush: How to Invest and Compete in the World of Generative AI.